Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I am your teacher, Saima Zaidi. The poem that we are going to read today is Snake. It is written by D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence was born in 1885 and died in 1930. He is among the well known English novelists and also a poet of considerable merit. The poem The Snake was published in his collection of poems entitled as the Birds, Beasts and Flowers. The Snake is among Lawrence's well-known poems. It has several layers of meaning and pinpoints the poet's different reactions to the snake: fear, horror, fascination, and finally remorse. The poet sees the snake first as an intruder who keeps him waiting for water at his own trough. This gives way to a feeling of being honored. He thinks of the snake as a guest, and a guest is traditionally held in great esteem. On another level, the poet presents a conflict between the rational and the intuitive. The voice of education dictates that the snake must be destroyed because of its harmful nature. Intuition delights in its physical attraction and royal bearing. The poet comes to the voice of his education and attacks the snake only to regret his mean and vulgar act. The reptile becomes a common the reptile becomes not a common snake, but it becomes a king, lord of the underworld, a god, and he, the man, a petty being, attacking an unsuspecting guest only to prove his manhood, and so he feels that he must expiate his pettiness. This poem, Snake, is a symbolic poem. The poet has described how two creatures belonging to different species, one to civilized human race and the other to reptile, come across and each come across each other, and what is their reaction. The poem has many shades of meanings. On a hot summer day, the poet comes downstairs with a pitcher to get water. He beholds a snake at the water trough. The snake drags its long golden body slowly. It rests its throat on the stone bottom of the water container. The water is falling from the tap drop after drop. The snake puts its mouth below and the water begins to fall directly into its mouth. The poet becomes glad seeing so beautiful a guest at his house. He is deeply impressed to see the brown colored snake with its soft belly resting at the edge of the container. Then the snake lifts its head like cattle and looks all around. It moves its two-forked tongue, muses a while, and drinks again. It again lifts its head and looks at the poet. Different ideas come into the poet's mind. He wants to kill it because it is poisonous and dangerous, but he does not, considering it his guest. Then the snake begins to crawl to its hole. Now it seems like the lord of the underworld. The poet feels that the snake is the king of the underground world. The poet throws a piece of log into the water. The noise of splash frightens the snake and it moves its remaining body hastily into the hole and disappears from the view. The poet presents various angles of human behavior in this poem. The natural instinctive urge in man makes the snake attractive. The social education instructs him that the snake is abhorring and dangerous. Different changes and thoughts come into his mind. These reactions are of fear, horror, fascination, and remorse. Firstly, he thinks that the snake is an intruder. The poet is, because the poet has to wait for a long time for his turn. But he feels honored as he is the host of so beautiful a snake. Then a conflict arises between the rational and intuitive in his mind. The voice of education tells him to kill it as it is a poisonous and dangerous creature. But intuitive voice compels him to appreciate its beauty and style. Then the snake, afterwards, then the snake returns to its dark hole. The poet yields to the voice of his education and strikes at it with a stick. The poet feels remorse at his action of attacking the snake. The snake appears to him to be the lord of the underworld. The poet wishes to atone for his mean action. He wants the snake to come out and be honored, loved, and appreciated by him. He thinks of his education as accursed because it does not allow him to appreciate the beauty of snake, who is earth brown and earth golden. The physical beauty and royal bearing of snake fascinates him, but his education stops him to treat the snake as a guest at his house. It prompts him to hate snake. It guides him not to trust a snake because it is the enemy of man. It makes him think that it is cowardice not to kill a snake. It does not make him respect and honor his guest, rather, it tempts him to kill it though it is returning to its hole. Even though it's returning to its hole, where he would be coronated, where the snake would be crowned. It is a sinful act to kill the beautiful creatures of Allah. Snake disappears, but the poet is left alone to feel remorse at his hitting the snake. He wants to compensate for his action but cannot. He thinks that our education and intellect produce in us doubts, superstitions, and fears. His education does not allow the poet to appreciate the beauty of the snake. Beauty deserves appreciation even in the ugly things of nature. The poet now thinks so. Now let us read the poem. First stanza. A snake came to my water trough on a hot, hot day, and I, in pajamas for the heat, to drink there. In these lines, the poet says that on a very hot, hot summer, that is, the snake came to the backyard of the poet. He was not wearing formal dress then. He wanted to get water at the water trough. There he saw a snake drinking water at the water trough. Next stanza. In the deep, strange scented shade of the great dark carob tree, I came down the steps with my pitcher and must stand and wait. For there was at the water trough, for there he was at the trough before me. Girls, strange scented, that is having a strange fragrance, अजीब सी खुशबू लिए हुए. Carob tree, it is a Mediterranean tree. Its fruit resembles chocolate. बहीरा रूम के इलाके का एक सदाबहार दरख्त है. इसका फल चॉकलेट जैसा होता है. In these lines, the poet says that it was very hot that day. Carob trees were spreading strange smell and shade. In this shade of the trees, he was he was carrying his pitcher of water in his hand to fetch water. He came down the steps to get water at the water trough, but he had to stand and wait long there because the snake had reached there before him and it had the right to drink first. So he kept waiting for his turn. So the poet kept waiting for his turn. Next stanza. He reached down from a fissure in the earth wall in the gloom and trailed his yellow-brown slackness soft-bellied, soft-bellied, down over the edge of the stone trough and rested his throat upon the stone bottom, and where the water had dripped from the tap in a small clearness, he sipped with his straight mouth, soft drankly through his straight gums into his slackening body silently. Fissure, that is crack in the wall, darar, gloom, तारीकी, trailed, घसीटते हुए, dragging, slackness, that is laziness, susti, soft bellied, that is having a soft body, edge, kinara, bottom, बाल्टी जो कंटेनर है जो वाटर ट्रॉफ है उसकी निचली सतह, ड्रिप्ड, टपक रहा था पानी, ड्रॉप आफ्टर ड्रॉप, slipped, that the snake was drinking water with ease, आराम से पानी पी रहा था, gums, मसूड़े, slack, lazy, सुस्त. In these lines, the poet says that the snake had come from a dark crack in the mud wall. He had come there slowly, dragging his yellow-brown body with his soft belly downward. He had reached the side of the stone trough and had rested his throat on the stone bottom. The water was falling from the tap into the trough. The place where water was falling, the snake began to sip water directly. The water seemed passing from his gums through his long body silently. Next lines. Someone was before me at my water trough, and I, like a second comer, waiting. The snake was already there drinking water, and the poet had to wait for his turn. The poet now was the second comer. Next stanza. He lifted his head from drinking as cattle do, and looked at me vaguely as drinking cattle do. The snake seemed as harmless as grazing animals are. It looked like the grazing animals, the cattle. It lifted his head and looked at the poet like grazing cattle, and flickered his two-forked tongue from his lips and mused a moment, and stooped and drank a little more, being earth brown, earth golden from the burning bowels of the earth on the day of Sicilian July with Etna smoking. The snake waved its tongue, and the thought and he thought for a moment. The snake thought for a few moments. Then it bent down and sipped water again. Its color resembled that of the earth. It was a day it was a day of July in Sicily, Italy, and Etna was smoking. Etna is a volcano in Sicily, Italy. This line shows extreme hot summer. It is extreme hot weather. The poet imagines the snake to be Typhon, the mythical and monstrous serpent that was defeated by Zeus by throwing Mount Etna on it, but that still spews up fire and boulders when the mountain erupts. Next lines. The voice of my education said to me, he must be killed. For in Sicily, the black snakes are innocent, the gold are venomous. Wisdom demanded that the snake must be killed at once, as soon as it is seen. In Sicily, black snakes are considered harmless, but the golden ones are thought to be poisonous. And voices in me said, if you were a man, you would take a stick and break him now and finish him off. His inner self again urged him to kill the snake. It would be a manly action. But must I confess how I liked him, how glad I was he had come like a guest in quiet to drink at my water trough. But he cannot help accepting that he was happy to receive him like a guest in a calm and perfectly peaceful atmosphere. The poet was so fascinated by the beauty of the snake that he was feeling that the atmosphere was quiet, even though it was a hot weather at the time. Girls, it's a very long poem. We have read so many lines. This poem consists of 19 stanzas of variable length. The entire poem consists of 75 lines in total. And here you see that the poet paints a vivid pictorial image of the snake that happened to come to quench his thirst in the backyard of the poet from the crack in the wall. This serpent, the snake, is now considered by the poet um, a guest. And next lines पढ़ते हैं girls, next stanza. And depart peaceful, pacified and thankless into the burning bowels of this earth. Was it cowardice that I dared not kill him? Was it perversity that I longed to talk to him? Was it humility to feel so honored? I felt so honored. The snake drank water and returned calmly. The snake drank water and returned calmly and harmlessly to its home in the wall. The poet mused whether it was that he was not courageous enough to kill the snake, or it was an evil wish to crave for talking to it, whether it was his humbleness that he felt so honored to receive the snake as a guest. Finally, he felt that he felt honored. Next two lines पढ़ते हैं. And yet those voices, if you were not afraid, you would kill him. And yet the inner self led him to feel that horror overpowered and dominated him, otherwise he would have killed the snake. Next stanza. And truly I was afraid, I was most afraid, but even so honored still more, that he should seek my hospitality from out the dark door of the secret earth. The poet accepts that he was horrified. However, the poet feels that the feeling of being honored is far more greater than the fear. Next stanza. He drank enough and lifted his head dreamily as one who has drunken, and flickered his tongue like a forked knife on the air, so black, seeming to lick his lips, and looked around like a god, unseeing into the air, and slowly turned his head, and slowly, very slowly, as if thrice in a dream, proceeded to draw his slow length curving round, and climb again the broken bank of my wall face. When the snake had quenched his thirst, it looked around dignifiedly and started towards its home in the wall. It was going back slowly in a curving, winding manner. Next stanza. And as he put his head into that dreadful hole, and as he slowly drew up, snake easing his shoulder, and entered farther, a sort of horror, a sort of protest against his withdrawing into that horrid black hole, deliberately going into the blackness and slowly drawing himself after, overcame me. Now his back was turned. When the snake was about to disappear completely into its home in the wall, then the fear overcame the poet. Next lines. I looked round, I put down my pitcher, I picked up a clumsy log and threw it at the water trough with a clatter. The poet left his pitcher. The poet had to leave his picture. He left his picture, found an ugly log. The poet found an ugly log, and he threw it at the water with a splash. He took a piece of wood and threw it at the water with a noise. Next lines. I think it did not hit him, but suddenly that part of him that was left behind convulsed in undignified haste. The log did not actually strike the snake, but the snake felt that it was attacked. It moved hurriedly to disappear completely. Next lines. Writhed like lightning and was gone. Into the black hole, the earth-lipped fissure in the wall front, and which in the intense noon I stared with fascination. Writhing and wriggling like a flash of lightning, it disappeared and reached safely into its home in the wall in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, it was into his home. The poet felt enchanted by the event in a silent noon. The repetition of the line from the burning bowels of the earth. Girls, if we go through the poem, we will find that there is repetition of some lines and some words. The repetition of the line from the burning bowels of the earth and from out the dark door of the secret earth, and the use of the words so black, horrid black, and I stared with fascination. I stared with fascination. Suggest that the snake represents the Saturn that is from the hell. Saturn belongs to hell, and hell is thought to be somewhere down in the earth. That is, the poet says, from the burning bowels of the earth. It represents the aims and objects of Saturn. It seems that the snake represents the aims and objects of Saturn, and, it represents evil. Evil that beguiles and tempts the humanity. It fascinates the humanity with its charms, even though it is deadly. Next lines. And immediately I regretted it. I thought, how paltry, how vulgar, what a mean act. I despised myself and the voices of my accursed human education. The next moment, the poet felt that he was feeling repentant. The poet repented of his attack and felt that his attack was a worthless, indecent, and low action. He hated he hated his manly wisdom that led him to attack the snake. Next lines. And I thought of the albatross, and I wished he would come back, my snake. The poet thought that the snake was as harmless as a seabird albatross, and so he desired to have it back to him again. The poet feels that he is like the ancient mariner in the poem by S.T. Coleridge entitled as The Ancient Mariner. In this poem, the ancient mariner killed the albatross for no reason. Albatross, that is a seabird. Next lines. For he seemed to me again like a king in exile, uncrowned in the underworld, now due to be crowned again. The poet now feels that the snake is the king of the underground world. The snake seemed to the poet like a banished king, like a king in exile, like a banished king that should be crowned now. Exile, that is banish the king, like a king who was banished, a king in exile, a, a banished king. And um, and so I missed my chance with one of the lords of life, and I have something to expiate the pettiness, and I have something to expiate a pettiness. The poet lost an opportunity to praise the beauty of this king in exile, and he now wants to compensate for his action of attacking the snake. The poet wanted to atone for his attack, to have it again, to treat it as a guest and appreciate its beauty. That was our poem of today. You are going to prepare the critical appreciation of the poem, and you have to go through the text also, because you can have an extract for explanation in the question paper. So girls, you can read it, the text, it's simple and easy, and you are going to prepare the critical appreciation, and you must go through all the questions as well. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.